Have you ever just stopped for a moment, looked around, and realized that the visits you once looked forward to, the laughter, the catching up, the endless small talk, don't feel the same anymore? That the energy it takes to dress up, smile, sit through conversations that no longer touch your heart, somehow feels heavier than it used to? Maybe you've felt it, that quiet sigh when the phone rings, and someone says, "Come over, it's been a while." And you think to yourself, "I should go." But your heart whispers, "I just don't have it in me today." You're not rude. You're not antisocial. You're just tired, not physically, but emotionally. Tired of always being on. Tired of conversations that circle around the same stories, the same complaints, the same energy that drains more than it fills. See, no one tells you this part about growing older. They talk about the silver hair, the creaky joints, and the doctor visits, but no one tells you that as you age, your spirit changes too. The noise that once thrilled you starts to hurt your peace. The crowd that once made you feel alive now feels too loud, too fast, too demanding. And before you know it, you start pulling back, not because you've given up on people, but because you've started giving in to peace. The truth is, there's a moment after 70 when you begin to understand something others might not, that silence can be kinder than chatter, and solitude can feel warmer than company. You start craving mornings with your thoughts, afternoons with your tea, evenings with your memories. You realize that peace doesn't always come from being around people, sometimes it comes from finally being with yourself. And that's what this video is about. Today, I want to share with you 6 honest, unfiltered reasons why I stopped visiting people after I turned 70, and why I've never looked back. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying you should cut people off or hide away from the world. But I want you to see what I discovered, the quiet freedom, the unexpected joy, and the deep peace that came from simply choosing myself. Some of what I'm about to say might surprise you, maybe even challenge you. But if you listen with an open heart, you might see your own reflection somewhere in my words. So before we dive in, tell me this, do you still enjoy visiting people like you used to? Or have you found more comfort in staying home, surrounded by your own little world of peace and quiet? I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And if this is your first time here, welcome to Elderly Wisdom Guide, a space where we talk openly about aging, self-awareness, and finding calm in a world that never slows down. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button, and join this growing circle of wisdom. Because growing older isn't the end of life's journey, it's the moment you finally start living it on your own terms. Now, let's begin. There came a time when every visit started to feel like a small performance. I'd sit there, nodding at stories I'd already heard 100 times, laughing at jokes that weren't funny anymore, and pretending to care about things that no longer stirred anything inside me. I wasn't doing it to be fake, I was doing it because it was expected. You know that feeling, don't you? That quiet exhaustion that comes from trying to keep everyone else comfortable, while you're silently drifting away from the moment. Somewhere along the way, I realized I wasn't being true to myself anymore. I was showing up physically, but not emotionally. Every conversation started feeling scripted, like a scene in a play where I no longer believed in the lines. And when I'd come home afterward, I'd feel empty, not refreshed, not fulfilled, just drained. As you get older, you stop wanting to play roles. You've lived too many years pretending for work, for family, for peace. And when the later years arrive, your heart just wants honesty. You no longer have the patience to smile when you're tired, to agree when you disagree, or to sit through gossip that doesn't feed your soul. See, when you're younger, you can fake your way through a conversation. You can pretend you're enjoying yourself just to fit in. But after 70, your spirit becomes allergic to pretending. It's not bitterness. It's clarity. It's realizing that time is too precious to spend in places where your heart isn't at peace. People often say, "Oh, they're just getting old and cranky." But it's not crankiness, it's emotional honesty. It's choosing peace over pretense. And there's such freedom in that. When you stop pretending, you stop carrying the weight of other people's expectations. You start speaking softly but truthfully. You smile only when it's real. And you find yourself breathing easier, because you're finally being you. If you've ever sat in a room and felt invisible, or listened to a conversation and thought, I don't belong here anymore, then maybe your spirit is trying to tell you something. Maybe it's time to step back from the noise and step closer to your truth. It's okay to choose quiet authenticity over noisy companionship. It's okay to walk away from gatherings that leave you drained instead of filled. Because at this age, peace is not a luxury, it's survival. And once I made that choice, to stop pretending, to stop showing up out of obligation, I began to notice something else. I started to feel people's energy more clearly. Suddenly, I could tell who brought calm into the room, and who carried chaos. And once I became aware of that, I realized something even deeper: not everyone's presence brings peace anymore. I used to visit old friends out of habit, not joy. It was something I'd done for years: birthdays, little get-togethers, Sunday afternoons filled with chatter and laughter. But one day, I came home from a gathering, sat down in my chair, and just sighed. Not the kind of sigh that comes from being full and happy, but the kind that comes from being drained. And that's when it hit me: I had spent hours surrounded by people I knew, yet somehow, I felt lonelier than when I was by myself. You see, no one warns you about how your heart changes as you age. In your younger years, you crave company, you feed off it. But later in life, your spirit grows more sensitive, more aware. You start feeling the atmosphere around you in ways you never did before. A forced smile, a half-hearted conversation, a bit of gossip here and there, all those little things begin to weigh heavier on you. Your body slows down, yes, but your spirit sharpens. You start recognizing the difference between people who bring peace and those who bring pressure. And that's when you start noticing that not everyone's energy is good for your soul. Some people walk into a room and everything feels lighter, their presence feels calm, like a quiet song playing in the background of your day. But others? They carry chaos without even realizing it. They complain, they criticize, they gossip, and when they leave, it feels like they've taken a piece of your strength with them. I used to think I was imagining it. But then I realized it wasn't my imagination, it was my awareness growing. Aging doesn't just make you older, it makes you wiser about where your peace truly lives. And the more I listened to that inner sense, the more I understood, my peace was fragile, and not everyone deserved access to it. People often say, you have to stay social to stay happy. And yes, companionship matters. But forced company can do more harm than good. There's a big difference between being around people who make you feel alive and those who make you feel drained. When you spend time with people who constantly complain, compare, or bring negativity, your heart starts to carry their weight. You may not notice it right away, but you'll feel it later, in your mood, your thoughts, even your sleep. You might have felt that before. You return home, close the door, and the silence feels like medicine. That's not loneliness talking, that's your soul recovering. That's your body saying, thank you for the quiet. And that's when I learned something powerful: your peace is sacred. You must guard it the same way you guard your health. Because in our later years, peace is health. It's the difference between waking up calm and waking up tense. Between enjoying your tea in silence or spending hours replaying a stressful conversation. So, I started saying no more often, gently, respectfully, but firmly. I stopped forcing myself to go places that left me uneasy. I stopped apologizing for choosing peace. And I began to understand that no is not rejection, it's protection. Protection of your heart, your energy, your calm. If someone drains you every time you see them, you don't owe them constant access to your time. That doesn't mean you love them less, it just means you love yourself enough to set boundaries. So, protect your peace like medicine. Because peace, at this stage in life, is not just a feeling, it's survival. And when I finally embraced that, I began to notice another truth. It wasn't just people that were changing. Time itself started to feel different. Days began to move faster, yet my need for stillness grew stronger. And that realization, that shift in how I felt time, became one of the biggest lessons of my later years. At 70, time feels different. It's not that the days got shorter, it's that they started feeling more precious. The hours don't stretch the way they used to. An afternoon that once felt long enough to fit in errands, visits, and conversation now slips by in what feels like minutes. And every sunrise? It feels sacred. You wake up, feel the air against your skin, and realize that just opening your eyes is a quiet miracle. There's something about reaching this stage of life that makes you see time differently. You stop counting days in weeks and months, and start counting them in moments, the kind that actually mean something. A warm cup of coffee before dawn. A gentle breeze that carries the scent of rain. A short call from a grandchild who still says, "I love you, Grandma." Those small moments suddenly feel bigger than any crowded room or busy day ever could. I used to fill my calendar just to keep myself busy. I thought if I had places to go and people to see, it meant I was still living. But one afternoon, I sat at a friend's gathering, surrounded by laughter and chatter, and all I could think about was the quiet back home. The peace waiting for me in my garden, the chair by the window where the light falls just right. That was when I realized, I didn't want to spend my remaining years in small talk or meaningless chatter. I wanted peace. I wanted purpose. You see, there's something fascinating about aging. Your relationship with time transforms. Psychologically, it's been proven that as we grow older, our perception of time speeds up. Maybe it's because we've already seen so much of it, or because we finally understand that there's less of it ahead. But that awareness sharpens your priorities. You begin to see how easily time can be wasted, in arguments, in obligations, in trying to please everyone but yourself. And so, you start choosing differently. You stop saying yes to everything. You stop forcing yourself to fill the silence. You begin to understand that stillness isn't empty, it's healing. It's a space where your heart gets to breathe, where your thoughts settle like dust after a long storm. So many people fear stillness. They think being still means being lonely. But that's not true. Stillness is where peace grows roots. It's where you remember who you are beneath all the noise of other people's lives. When you sit quietly and watch the light change across your living room wall, or when you listen to the birds in the distance, that's not doing nothing. That's living in its purest form. That's savoring the gift of time that so many people rush through without noticing. If you've ever felt guilty for wanting quiet days at home instead of busy social ones, let that guilt go. You've earned your calm. You don't need to fill every minute with movement. Sometimes, the most meaningful moments are the ones where you simply exist. Spend time with purpose, not just people. Let your hours be filled with what brings you peace, a slow morning, a favorite song, a memory that warms your heart. Because in the end, it's not about how many people you visited, but how deeply you lived the moments you were given. And when I embraced that truth, when I started treasuring time instead of wasting it, I began to see something else that hit me deeply. When I stopped visiting out of habit and started spending my time intentionally, I noticed who truly cared, and who didn't. When I stopped showing up at every event, many faces disappeared. At first, I thought maybe people got busy, that they'd call later, or drop by when they had time. But days turned to weeks, and weeks into months. The phone grew quieter. The house, too. And one afternoon, I realized something that both hurt and healed at the same time. Some people were never really there for me. They were there for the convenience of my company. I used to be the one who called first. The one who remembered birthdays, who checked in, who organized get-togethers. But when I stopped being that person, the silence revealed everything. It was almost like taking a step back from a painting and finally seeing what was missing. You begin to notice who reaches out when you stop trying. Who truly values you even when you're not the one making the effort. Aging has a way of filtering people. It's not dramatic, it's quiet. Life simply shows you, with time, who belongs in your circle and who was just passing through. Real friends don't need reminders. They don't need your energy to prove your worth. They check in because they care. They show up because they want to, not because they have to. And the rest? They fade. Not out of malice, but because their season in your life has ended. And that's okay. Because peace often begins the moment you stop chasing people who stopped meeting you halfway. So many of us mistake withdrawal for isolation. We think that stepping back means we're losing connection. But in truth, stepping back allows you to see clearly. You begin to understand that being alone isn't the same as being lonely. Sometimes, it's a sign of emotional maturity, the point where your heart says, I only have space for sincerity now. I remember sitting by the window one morning, coffee in hand, and thinking about all the people who once filled my life with noise. The endless conversations, the constant plans, the expectations to always be available. And then I thought about the few who remained. The ones who checked in with no agenda. The ones who stayed consistent when life got quiet. Those few felt like sunlight breaking through the clouds. Cherish those people. They are your emotional wealth. They might not fill your days with constant activity. But they fill your heart with something deeper, reassurance, comfort, and genuine care. You don't need a crowd to feel loved. You just need a few who love you deeply. So, if your circle has gotten smaller over the years, don't see it as loss, see it as refinement. You're not losing people. You're gaining clarity. And that clarity brings peace. But even among those who stayed, those rare and precious few, I began to notice something else. Something that no one likes to admit, yet every aging soul eventually feels. It wasn't about who was there anymore. It was about how they were there. Some stayed, yes, but their presence began to change. The conversations shifted. After 70, I started noticing something strange. I was still surrounded by people, yet I often felt unseen. Conversations changed. Or maybe I did. The topics that once filled entire afternoons, politics, gossip, complaints, they just stopped meaning anything to me. I'd sit there, nodding politely, but inside, my mind wandered somewhere else. While others argued over things that didn't matter, I found myself craving depth, a quiet talk about life, faith, childhood memories, or simply gratitude for another sunrise. It wasn't boredom. It was growth. After a certain age, your soul no longer wants noise, it wants nourishment. Your heart begins to search for truth, not talk. And that's something only time can teach. See, the human brain changes as we get older. Science even says our emotional priorities shift. We no longer chase excitement, we seek understanding. We don't want to prove anything, we just want to feel something real. And so, meaningless chatter starts to feel heavy, like carrying a bag full of air. But of course, people misunderstood. Some thought I was losing interest in life. They said, "You don't talk much anymore." Or, "You used to be so social." And I'd smile, because they couldn't see that silence doesn't mean sadness. Sometimes silence is just wisdom that's learned to speak only when it's worth it. You begin to realize that not every conversation deserves your energy. And that's not arrogance, it's peace. You've lived long enough to understand that words can drain as much as they can heal. And if you've spent a lifetime listening to others, you start valuing the rare moments when someone truly listens to you. So if you ever find yourself craving quiet, thoughtful conversations, don't feel guilty. You're not being distant. You're simply growing deeper roots. And those who truly understand you will meet you there. In that space of calm, honest connection. Because when you've lived through the storms of life, you no longer need to explain your calm to anyone. You just live it. And that leads me to perhaps the most honest reason of all. One morning, I realized something beautiful. I hadn't visited anyone in months, yet, I wasn't lonely. Not even for a moment. In fact, I was at peace. My days were simple. I'd wake up to the sound of birds, take a slow walk, make myself tea, maybe listen to an old song that reminded me of a time when life was simpler. Sometimes I'd read a little, pray a little, or just sit by the window watching the world go by. And for the first time in years, that felt enough. That's when it hit me, solitude after 70 isn't isolation. It's restoration. It's the soul finally taking a deep breath after decades of holding itself together for others. All the roles you played, parent, spouse, provider, friend, they fade a little. And what's left is you. Just you, unmasked, unhurried, and free. People fear being alone, but there's a sacred peace in your own company. You start to realize that being by yourself doesn't mean being forgotten, it means being found. Found by your own spirit. Found by your memories. Found by the quiet truths that life has been whispering to you all along. You stop chasing validation. You stop forcing visits that drain your energy. You stop apologizing for needing quiet. Because peace stops being optional, it becomes necessary. And here's the most beautiful part. When you finally make peace with being alone, you realize you're never truly alone. You carry every person you've loved within you. Every lesson, every laugh, every tear, it all lives there. Your solitude becomes your sanctuary, not your sentence. So, if you've reached this stage, don't feel guilty. You're not pushing people away. You're simply coming home, to yourself. And there's no greater peace than that. Because in the end, life isn't about how many doors you knock on. It's about how many hearts you learn to rest in. Including your own. Many won't understand why you stopped visiting. They'll whisper. They'll wonder. Some might even call you distant, or withdrawn. But only you know the truth, the kind of peace that comes when the world grows quiet. And all that's left is the calm rhythm of your own thoughts. You see, people often misunderstand silence. They confuse it with sadness. But silence can be sacred. It's where you finally meet yourself after years of being what everyone else needed you to be. When I stopped visiting, it wasn't because I stopped caring, it was because I started healing. There's a certain calm that comes from not forcing yourself to fit into spaces that no longer feel right. A comfort in waking up and knowing that the only person you need to please today is yourself. And yes, it hurts sometimes, the distance, the change, the realization that life has quietly shifted. But it also brings something deeply precious, clarity. You begin to see your relationships for what they truly are, not out of bitterness, but out of understanding. You realize that peace isn't found in the company of many, but in the presence of meaning. This stage of life isn't about withdrawal. It's about wisdom. You've spent decades giving your time, your strength, your laughter, your love. And now, you've learned what drains you, and what heals you. That's not isolation, that's growth. It's emotional maturity that only comes when you've lived long enough to understand that not every presence brings peace. So maybe it's time to reevaluate your own circle. Ask yourself quietly, who adds peace to my life? Who listens without judgment? Who brings calm instead of chaos? And just as importantly, who drains me without realizing it? Because at this age, every moment matters. Every visit, every conversation, every emotion you allow into your space, it all carries weight. You've earned the right to protect your energy. You've earned the right to say, no, not today. And you've earned the right to choose peace over pressure, calm over company, and self-care over social duty. You're not wrong for wanting quiet. You're not wrong for pulling back. You're simply honoring your spirit, something we spend too many years ignoring. Because sometimes, solitude isn't loneliness. It's homecoming. It's where the heart finally rests after a lifetime of trying to belong. So, to recap, I stopped visiting people after 70 for 6 simple but powerful reasons. I got tired of pretending. Not everyone brought peace anymore. Time began to feel different. I saw who truly cared. Conversations changed, and so did I. And in the end, I found peace in my own company. Each of these reasons came from experience, not bitterness. From clarity, not coldness. And if you felt any of these things too, know this, you're not alone. This is what emotional growth looks like when we finally stop living for approval and start living for peace. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Which of these reasons speaks to your heart the most? Or maybe you see things differently, maybe you still find joy in visiting others. There's no right or wrong here, just honest reflection. So share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might be the comfort someone else needs tonight. If this message touched something inside you, even just a little, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Elderly Wisdom Guide. Every day, we share reflections and life lessons that remind us that aging isn't about slowing down, it's about awakening to what really matters. Thank you for spending this quiet time with me today. I know your time is precious, and I'm honored you chose to share it here. May your days be peaceful, your thoughts gentle, and your spirit light. Until next time. Stay wise. Stay calm. And remember this truth that carries us through every season of life. Your peace, your beautiful, sacred peace, is your greatest gift.